Hi, hello, everybody. I'm Justin. This is Koopa. Welcome to Koopa's Corner. Today we're going to talk about WWE 2K25. Now, the road to WWE 2K25 has begun. It began with Raw on Netflix. Now, in case you missed it, there was just a little tease, right? Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman were walking backstage and they were talking, and Paul Heyman said, I'll put it on your calendar, January 27th, right? And Roman Reigns was like, yeah, January 27th. And then Paul Heyman was like, cool, January 27th. And then they walked through a door and they closed the door, and it was the WWE 2K25 logo. Now, this is the start of the journey, but there are a few other things that we know solidly for a fact at this point. 2K has announced that there's going to be something on January 28th. We also know that Steam sort of leaked potentially the cover star, which is Roman Reigns, if they're correct, right? We don't know if that's 100% going to be the case, but the profile was up on Steam for a little bit, and Roman Reigns was there, so we can assume he's going to be the cover star, right? We can also assume that the announcement on the 27th is probably going to be some sort of announcement about Roman Reigns being the cover star, right? Following it up with January 28th is probably going to be the first teaser trailer. We've also seen leaked screenshots of Liv Morgan and Bayley. Now, I don't think that there's anybody out there who doubted either of those superstars would be in the game. So that leak is not about they're on the roster. That leak, it just shows some of the updated in-game models, right? So you can compare Bayley from 25 to Bayley from 24 to Bayley from 23, and you can see, sort of some of the improvements, and you can kind of see, what else they're changing, right? So that you can sort of guess how other superstars are going to look. Now, that's what we know for sure. Now, I think what would be a really cool way to make that announcement would be Roman Reigns comes out, right? This is going to be a Monday. January 27th is a Monday. It's the Monday after the next Saturday night's main event. Roman Reigns comes out. He announces that he's the cover star, or Paul Heyman announces that he's the cover star, something like that. Then The Rock comes out. Then The Rock basically says, "You're welcome." And, he pulled strings as the final boss to make this happen. Then he announces himself as the cover star for the deluxe edition, right? So we get the Raw on Netflix TKO executive version of The Rock off our screens again, right? Hopefully that was a one-off. This next appearance could kind of play into that a little bit and start to build some tension between Roman and The Rock, so that way we can get to that match, right? I think that would be a pretty cool way to do it. But anyway, that's what we know so far. Now, I've made a video already, and I'll link it in the description and at the end here. But it was, is this wish list for 2K25 realistic, right? And in the video, I talk about tempering our expectations, because with an annual release, you don't usually see big, drastic changes from year to year to year. So I talk about the monetization of it, particularly when it comes to my faction and the persona cards, and how a lot of this stuff is going to be the same. And then I proceed to list a few things that I think are very small things that they could put into the game that would add value. And I talk about, not being unrealistic and not having these crazy asks, right? A bunch of small quality of life changes. And well, I stand by that video and I stand by everything I said and some of the things that I want. I think some of those things would be fantastic. In this video, we're just going to go all out here. We're going to make some predictions, what we think are going to happen. Then we're going to make some over-the-top, ridiculous, big asks. You know, last video was about keeping it realistic. This video, we're just going to get wild, guys. We're going to talk about a best case scenario, right? And things that are never, ever going to happen. And I understand that up front, all right? But still. So let's talk about some of these things. Let's kind of go mode by mode and talk about our predictions for WWE 2K25. Now let's start off with showcase mode. I've heard a lot of people saying that they think it's going to be Roman Reigns, particularly if he's the cover star. It's a good guess. It's never going to happen, right? The problem with making Roman Reigns the showcase mode is that Roman Reigns has a long history, and you can't use any of the Shield stuff, right? Because Mox is an AEW. He had a big rivalry with Brock Lesnar, who I would be very surprised to see back in 25, right? With all of his, potential involvement to the Vince McMahon allegations. Be surprised if we see Lesnar. I don't think they're going to use any of the Lesnar stuff. That essentially just leaves Bloodline Roman Reigns. And at that point, I think it makes more sense to give us a Bloodline showcase, right? And I don't mean the Bloodline, Roman, Jimmy J, Sammy, Solo. I think it makes more sense that if we talk about the Bloodline, we're talking about all of the Samoan wrestlers, the Samoan dynasty, right? Now, some of this could get saved for a DLC, so we might not see these characters. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But, you could give us matches with the High Chief, Peter Maivia, the Soul Man, Rocky Johnson. You could give us the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika. You could give us Rikishi and Too Cool. You could give us Umaga. You could give us the 3-minute warning as persona cards, and or at least Jamal as a persona card for Umaga, right? But Rosie was Roman Reigns' brother, so you could involve them, and then you get The Rock. Of course, you get The Rock. He's had so many huge matches in WWE history, and of course Roman Reigns. We could even get Haku. A lot less likely, but we could get Superfly Jimmy Snuka. I don't think we'll ever see him in a WWE game again, to be honest. But you could, right? You could. I think going through the Samoan dynasty as a Bloodline showcase makes a lot more sense. So I think realistically, that's probably what we're going to get, something like that. If those characters are not DLC, or a lot of those characters are not DLC, which I think we will get a good handful of them as DLC, right? But something like that, almost like a history lesson, it could be pretty refreshing, and a lot of those things wouldn't be as well known as last year's 40-year of WrestleMania, right? Because we've had so many big matches that have lived on in history that everybody knows. And yeah, there's something about that, right? You want to live these big moments over again, but there's something else about, I didn't know that this guy had that match. I didn't know about that. You know what I mean? There's a history lesson there, and I think that would be really cool. So, TBD. I think next up, let's talk about Universe Mode. We've got a lot of big asks for Universe Mode, and we'll get to that later, but our realistic prediction here, I don't think we're going to see many changes, if any at all. They might do a few tweaks. They might try to clean it up a little bit, some of the coding up a little bit, make it smooth it out a little bit, get rid of some of the bugs, but I don't think we're going to see too much changed here. They've sort of been using old code from back in the THQ days, and it's hanging on with rubber bands and paper clips and bubblegum. It's not going to be rewritten. It's not going to be this whole new thing. Not yet. Not anytime soon. Let's talk about GM mode. I think GM mode actually has a lot of positive I think a lot of people speak pretty highly of GM mode in a way that they don't speak highly of universe mode, right? I think people want universe mode to be better than it is. I think people like the idea of universe mode. I think people actually like GM mode. So I don't think that we're going to see too many changes there. I think one of the big asks for that from the community is going to be just a little bit more control over your draft pools. Or let's say you create a new car, download a new car, and you're in the middle of a season, you can't insert them in. I think they could tweak stuff like that, which a big ask from the community, right? Something big for the community, but it's a small ask in what it would take for 2K to implement it. So I think that's why it's realistic. My faction mode, it's not going anywhere. It sucks. It sucks. But it's not going anywhere. They are going to continue to add persona cards and charge way too fucking much for them. You know, as if the $70, $100, $120 you're paying for the base game, you know, and all the DLC is not enough money to include all these extra characters. No. You're going to get them all behind a huge paywall in my faction. It's going to be more of the same. You know, hopefully they make them a little bit more accessible, but they're not going to be much cheaper, and they're not going to be, they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. So then the My Rise, let's talk about My Rise, right? My Rise is basically the story mode. You put your car in, you play through a story. I actually had a lot of fun in 24's My Rise. I don't think it's going anywhere. You sort of need a classic story mode or a classic career mode. And all you can really hope for is that this year's story is going to be an intriguing story. So that's all you can really hope for with that mode. Otherwise, perfectly happy with My Rise. And then finally, the Creation Suite. Again, I don't think we're going to see too many changes. With an annual release, you don't see these huge drastic changes from year to year to year. So, you know, a realistic prediction here, there are not going to be many changes. There were some bugs, that hopefully they clean that up. But it's the best part of the game here. The Creation Suite is one of the most in-depth in gaming. Not just, you know, 2K or WWE, but like all of, like this Creation Suite is so in-depth. You know, all we can hope for is more slots for your cause, more pieces, more generic things to kind of create your own custom cause rather than just creating people who are not in the company, right? But that's what I think is going to happen for each mode. Those are my predictions for each mode in WWE 2K25. Not a whole lot changing, but sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the stuff, hopefully they just clean them up a little bit, fix some of the bugs. I think that's about all we can ask. Next up, I want to talk roster. Let's talk about the roster for WWE 2K25. Now, guys, I didn't include this in predictions. We're going to be making some predictions here as well, but we've potentially got some unrealistic names, and we've also got some educated guesses, some hints here that these aren't going to be just full-on predictions. Right now, I was talking a little bit earlier about the Bloodline. I think this would make a great DLC pack if we had the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, if we had Haku, if we had the High Chief Peter Maivia, the Soul Man Rocky Johnson. I know he's not Samoan, but he's tied in here, right? If you do Soul Man Rocky Johnson, you could even do Tony Atlas. I think that's maybe a little less realistic, to be honest, right? But you could. And you could also do, again, Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Just, I don't think that's realistic at all. But I suppose it's possible, right? He's a pretty big name Samoan wrestler. Rikishi is typically in the game. Umaga is typically in the game. If you wanted to move Rikishi over, you could throw Too Cool in there, you know, to kind of give it some life. Or even if you didn't move Rikishi over, just because Rikishi was sort of known for that, Scotty 2 Hottie and Grandmaster Sexay could be additions just to round it out, but I don't think so. I think you're starting to get a little too big here. But yeah, a Bloodline pack, whether it's main game already or a separate DLC, probably a separate DLC, some sort of Samoan Dynasty pack, right? Um, let's talk about main roster additions. Obviously, there have been a lot of new superstars on the main roster since last year's game. We're looking at the new bloodline as the main culprits here. We've got, Tama Tonga, Tangaloa, and Jacob Fatu. They're going to be huge additions to this game. They could even be theoretically in that bloodline pack as well. But TBD on that, I don't know. We've also got the Motor City Machine Guns. Andrade is back. Penta just made his debut. So there are a good handful of superstars that you could either see as a DLC pack or, again, additions to the main game. Maybe a little less likely, but these are main roster superstars, so it's not out of the question, right? I think it's probably more likely than, the Samoan Dynasty people. Maybe NXT. NXT typically has a good handful of additions to the game. I'm not an NXT guy. I don't watch NXT. But there are a handful of superstars that even I know. And some of them would make great additions to this game, right? There was a really big deal about signing Julia. There was a really big deal about signing Stephanie Vaquer. There was a few Joe Hendry matches, right? He had a championship match at one point. So he would make a great addition to the pack if he was an NXT pack. Even though he's not regularly on NXT, right? His matches were there, so he would fit. The new NXT champion, Obafemi, I've heard a lot of great things about him, have not checked him out yet. But if he's the champion, right, that means he's a pretty big deal in NXT. So I'd be surprised if he got left out. And we saw Lash Legend and Jakar Jackson this past, was it Crown Jewel or was it King and Queen of the Ring? When they were in Saudi Arabia, I think it was Crown Jewel. There was a Fatal 4-Way for the Women's Tag Team Championships, and they were in that match. So they're two superstars that you could include. And then, maybe rounding it out, possibly Kalani Jordan, right? She was the North American champion. So, that would be a good handful of superstars that they could add. I don't want to see them go all in on NXT. I would rather see them have more legends in the game. I know it's not always a more common opinion, but there's a lot less value in NXT superstars in this game than there are legends. There's a lot less, ability for people to recognize them, right? If you're advertising on the commercials with a bunch of these, not yet main roster superstars, it's going to draw a lot less people to buy the game than if you put, these big legends out there, right? Statistically, mathematically, we're talking numbers here. The viewership for NXT is significantly less than the viewership for Raw and for SmackDown. So, yeah, a lot less people know who these superstars are. We could have some kind of Wyatt pack, right? The Wyatt 6 has been updated. Some of these superstars who've been in the game before have these new personas. We could have a couple versions of Bray Wyatt. You could have the US Express in there. Both of them were Hall of Fame class of, 2024, right? That's Mike Rotundo and Barry Windham. That's Bray Wyatt's father and uncle. They could fit new Hall of Famers, right? So there's a couple of options there. You could give us classic Bo Dallas from NXT, where all you had to do was Bo leave, right? You could do something like that. I don't think they're gonna really do persona cards too much as like DLC, like alternate personas of superstars already in the game, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that, maybe in my faction, if not there. But yeah, there's a few things there. And then a few kind of one-offs here. You could do a women's pack, right? Maybe you could do a few other things, but I think a couple one-offs. We could see Bill Nakano, right? She was also in the Hall of Fame this year, right? Bill Nakano 2024. Jesse the Body Ventura, we could see him maybe as a pre-order bonus. Right, Rid made his big return after nearly 40 years at Saturday Night's Main Event. He's going to continue to be a part of Saturday Night's Main Event going forward. So, yeah, Jesse the Body Ventura, that'd be a great inclusion. We saw Bill Goldberg, right? We saw Bill Goldberg teasing a match with Gunther from ringside this past year. So if he's involved with the WWE at all, bringing him back into the game. He was in most games for a long time, and last year he wasn't, so they could bring him back. We could also see the Bella twins back, or at least Nikki Bella, right after Raw on Netflix, if she's back in their good graces. Those are two big name superstars, and including them would add some depth to the division, right? There's all sorts of rumors about Jacqueline and Victoria and Tori Wilson, and there's a few superstars, right? One that I would love to see, AJ Lee, right? CM Punk is back. CM Punk's been back now for a little while. AJ Lee is probably not coming back. It would be awesome. It would be awesome if she was in the Royal Rumble. But I don't know how realistic it is, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't do a little business, sign a little contract, and include her into the video game. She gets a few royalties. She doesn't have to make any appearances. They get, a big boost, someone that they could advertise, and potentially sell some extra copies of the game if she was in it, right? So that's those are some roster possibilities for updates to 2K25, whether it's DLC, whether it's Persona cards, whether it's base game. Those are some roster stuff, guys. So keeping this going, we're just getting super in-depth here. We're talking everything 2K25 today. We're going to talk about match types. There's a handful of match types that they could add. Because realistically, these were all match types that we saw in the WWE this year. Well, most of them. The I Quit match. Big return of the I Quit match. A lot of people talk about the I Quit match, want to see the I Quit match come back. And we saw Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles at Backlash in the I Quit match. So I'm starting with the I Quit match. We also had a big strap match. Bash in Berlin, CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre. Throw that in the game. Let us recreate that match. Let us, go from corner to corner. It'd be a different dynamic. It'd be a lot of fun. Dumpster match, right? We've already got the casket match. It'd be pretty similar, gameplay to make that work. Just changing the aesthetics a little bit. And there was a dumpster match on SmackDown between the first ever, the longest reigning, the youngest, the oldest Women's United States Champion of all time, Chelsea Green, and Mia Yim, aka Michin. Right? They had a big dumpster match before the U.S. title tournament. They could bring it in. We could see it. Another thing I think pretty obvious, Bloodline rules and or tribal combat. There wouldn't really be a lot to the game or to the mode. It'd just be a basic, no DQ match, right? But they could have it turned on so that there's interference. Like that could be the gimmick of the match. Is like someone's gonna run out and you gotta dodge them or something like that. But I don't know. But you probably will have it. It'd be a nice, easy way to throw in a new match type, right? And we saw both of those on WWE in the past year. Now, the last match type I'm going to ask for in this game is 3 Stages of Hell. We haven't seen one of these in real life in a long time, but it shouldn't be that hard to implement. Just string together 3 different matches. Just make something like a last man standing match ineligible for the first fall or the second fall, right? It's got to be the final fall. But other than that, anything else that's pinfall or submission can be the first 2 falls. And yeah, just string them together. Best 2 out of 3, but each of the 3 falls have a different stipulation. That's nice and easy. So those are some of the match types that could or should be added. And now, guys, there's a few other things that I think are really big, unrealistic, head in the clouds type asks. And again, I want to reiterate, I don't necessarily think these things are going to happen. I stand by that last video that I made, and I stand by a lot of the things I wanted in that video for this game. Realistically. This, on the other hand, completely unrealistic, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. So, be okay with that too. But this one probably is a pretty common sentiment. Not a lot of people seem to be a fan of it. Showcase mode. I want to see them do away with showcase mode completely. Right? Get rid of it. Or change it. Change it so that it's not the showcase mode that we know today. Couple things. The slingshot technology disrupts the gameplay, disrupts the pacing. And that in and of itself is kind of problematic, but it's not huge. You now insert these video clips where the commentary is muted, the entrance music is muted, the logos are all blurred, the referee is blurred. It's barely watchable. This is content that WWE should own and should be able to put into the game, but they don't. So how do we change it? Right? If we don't get rid of it, how do we change it? To keep it immersive, to not let it take you out of the moment. I think a couple of things here is maybe that you animate the cutscenes instead of going to a video clip, right? That way it flows more evenly in and out of the match. Maybe you recreate these moments with a caw instead of, for example, a WrestleMania 3, Hogan slamming Andre the Giant. Instead of playing that match again and being Hulk Hogan and having to slam Andre the Giant, let me put myself in the game and give me that cutscene if I trigger the right conditions for me, myself, or whatever caw I use, to get in there to body slam Andre the Giant. Or maybe it's plays out like a what if, and you have to rewrite history. You're Andre the Giant and you have to avoid getting slammed, and then you put your cutscene at the end, right? You get through the match, you put your cutscene at the end of, if that happens, then this is how WWE history is changed, right? So that could be fun. Okay, Andre the Giant doesn't get slammed. He ends up winning at WrestleMania 3. He ends up going on to win the title here. He ends up going on to have this feud with this person. This is how WWE history plays out if Hulk Hogan doesn't slam Andre the Giant. And not in a realistic, it starts to bomb and they lose all these sales. No, we're strictly talking storyline here. Give me these wild stories with these wild endings, just that go in completely different directions from the way it actually played out. That's another option. I think that's great. But you got to change it up, right? Because right now it's disruptive and it takes you out of the moment. It takes you out of the immersion, particularly with all of the censorship. That is such a huge, huge problem. This next ask is going to be wildly unpopular. Let's do away with universe mode. I know. What the fuck am I on, right? No, don't get me wrong. I like the idea of having like a sandbox, right? Where you could kind of recreate whatever you want to recreate. You kind of build your own shows, build your own stories. The problem is these storylines take so long to set up in universe mode. You spend more time setting the matches up than playing the matches. Give me some other kind of story mode, right? Give me an AI that remembers what happens in previous weeks, that I don't have to set up as much. I can just sort of plug in this superstar feuding with this superstar, and then that's all I have to set up, right? And then it'll throw in cutscenes. It'll throw in promos. It'll take me on the story with them, right? That's what I want. I want to get lost in the storytelling. I want to get lost in the immersion. I don't want to spend all this time tweaking all these little details and building and setting up before I get into a match, right? So that's why universe mode needs to change. It just needs to change. It's too much setup, not enough playing. Let the game remember. Just remember your wins and your losses, right? I can set up a number one contenders match that way, or I could have a tournament that way. But I'd rather build my own shows and build my own stories week in and week out. And I'd rather do that and then play through them and live through them rather than just spend so much time setting it up. And I don't have a a good way to draft my roster. It's remembering which superstars where. It's, it's a problem, right? If you go on to Reddit or you go on to one of these, any other place that the community hangs out, right? And you can look for these questions. People have asked them, hey guys, how do you make universe mode fun, or how do you keep it going after so long? And all the comments will be like, oh, well, I have this big notebook and I write everything down, and that way I can keep track from week to week to week. My dude, I have a lot of respect that you're willing to go through those lengths. But let's get one thing straight. You're not using a notebook to enhance your WWE 2K experience. You're using WWE 2K to enhance your fantasy booking. You could get a notebook. You could do all that stuff on your own without actually playing a match, right? I think the plus side to doing that with the video game is that you can simulate the match and you don't necessarily know who's going to win. That way it keeps you on your toes as you're writing going forward. But that is a writing exercise that you are enhancing with a video game. That is not a gaming, experience that you're enhancing with your notebook. And I think that a lot of people get that mixed up, right? You shouldn't have to do that. If you want a fantasy book, get a notebook and fantasy book. I'm all for it. But that is not the same, right? And that is a failure on the video game's part, that's necessary, right? If that's the only way to enjoy universe mode, I think that's why it's a problem, right? We need something in the game that remembers, that recaps previous weeks, or it just takes you on these stories. It just lets you plug in a few things, and it takes you on these stories on its own. So I'd love to see a completely do away with universe mode. Give me something new, something similar, but something completely different, right? I want to see it. I want the spirit of the mode without the actual way that the mode is set up. And I know that's a huge, huge ask. I think number 3 for me, create a finish. Bring it back, right? It was in the game. It was so good. It really allowed you to personalize your cause. Guys, I don't know how you play the game, right? Do you look for cause and build cause of superstars that are not in the game but are real life superstars, or do you create your own original cause? Me, myself, create a lot of original cause. I've got my Create a Wrestler Showcase on the channel, and I'll do another one, and I'll have a lot of new names. But I've had some of these original characters around with me for almost 20 years. Not all of them, not even most of them. But I've had a handful of wrestlers that have been in every single game, since like SmackDown versus Raw. Like the original one, 2005. So I like, the ability to, customize, the ability to make them feel original, to make them feel, unique. I love the generic entrance musics, the generic entrance videos, that kind of stuff that aren't tied specifically to somebody else already in the game. Give me create a finish so that I can just give them a little bit of that personality, that unique personality, and kind of make them stand out. I don't want to give them a choke slam. I don't want to give them a power bomb. I mean, sometimes I do, depends on the call, but I don't want to give them the same generic finish. I don't want to give them a super kick, the same move that dozens of other superstars use. So I think that is a big one. This next one is going to be also probably pretty unrealistic, particularly for the video games, right? Intergender matches. This does not promote violence against women. It doesn't. They think it does, but it doesn't. If anything, I want to play as Rhea Ripley, and I want to whoop Dom's ass. I want to create violence for women, not against women. I want to create violence against Dirty Dom. And, while we're on the topic, in real life also, give me that match. Give me that match, right? Just give me the match. But if you won't give me the match, let me play the match in WWE 2K25. And I think the last thing, guys, maybe unrealistic, maybe not, depends on your opinion. But I want the game to be fun. Point blank. That's it. Fun. Capture some of the magic of the old video games. I don't need everything to be 1,000,000% realistic. I have actual WWE for that. You know, in the old games, the controls were pretty simple. I didn't need a dozen different ways to do things. You know, you could stack up 2 tables, 3 tables on top of each other and fall through a ladder or off of a ladder through the tables. I mean, you could just do stuff, random stuff in real life that they can't do or it would take a lot of setup to do. Just give me that kind of stuff, man. Just let me do the wild stuff and simplify the gameplay, simplify the controls, make everything flow and just let it be fun. That's all. I think that's the most important thing. And hopefully they can at least deliver on that one, if nothing else. So that's it for today's video, guys. Again, you know, the road to 2K25 has started with Raw on Netflix. We talked about everything we know. We talked about our predictions for everything we want to happen, roster, match types, each of the modes, and then we made some really big, probably unrealistic asks. If you'd like to see more realistic asks, check out my video here at the end. The link is also in the description. Some video I made a little while back. If you're excited for the game, drop a comment, let me know. Like the video, and thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see ya in the next one.